Well, welcome back. I hope you were well. It's good to have you return as always. Never taking that for granted. Let me start today's session by sharing an experience I had over the weekend. As many of you perhaps also experience, the weekends are useful opportunities and periods and times for us to get around those we love and those we care about, but also get around the community and get involved and meet people we do not know. And in the interactions that come from those moments, we have an opportunity to calibrate, to adjust, to modify, or perhaps to double down on areas of our lives that we hold near and dear. Now, in this particular instance, I'm drawn back to the same conversation about relationships because I am of the strong opinion and position that it is the most important topic that we should be focusing on as a nation, as a community, as families, and as individuals, and for various reasons. I won't go into all of those in this session. In any case, my beloved and I, we were talking because we had just come back from being with a friend, friend of the family, and they had just had an introduction to their family, and it was great. The beauty of a new baby's cries and stares and confused looks and states is to be appreciated. The gift of life, the gift of love, the idea of seeing the highest honor a woman can give a man in human form, but also the seed of a man in human form. It's just wonderful. Now, I talk to women usually and I say, bringing into this world a life is the most important job. I hate to use the word job, but something people can relate to. But it's the most important duty, most important gift, obligation, purpose that a woman can experience. Yes, it comes with its challenges, no doubt. But it's so important that in several biblical references, I hate to use that as an example, several times, there is a story and account of an angel appearing to several women to say, you will be with child. Now we can go back from the chronological period and we talk about Samuel, then we talk about John, and then we talk about the person called the Christ. In each of those women, Samuel's mother, Elizabeth, and Mary, were bestowed, the greatest honor to say, you will be with child, and my presence here is a symbol to show off the importance of what it means for a child to go and to come from you. You will bring forth into the world something useful and beautiful, which is a child. And so we spend time with loved ones, and as always, incredible. But as we started talking later, the idea of relationships came to mind, and I couldn't understand, as we talked about other loved ones and other friends, I couldn't understand how and why relationships are hard, and why we fail in our relationships, and why we fail in the art or the science or the craft of relationships. And I say that for various reasons. Now, in this particular instance, I'm talking to women for one of two reasons. Firstly, if we look at the United Kingdom, this is a very sensitive conversation, but a conversation that is worthy of it becoming discussed. If we were to look at the United Kingdom, And we looked at divorce rates and those filing for divorces. Something drew my attention when I saw the last data set. In 2019, we had a significant increase in divorces. In 2020, that number jumped by 10%. 2021, that number, if you adjusted for the fact that there was a delay as a result of family courts being closed, jumped. 2023 will be on record for the first time where we see a significant increase in divorces. But put that aside. Traditionally, the country being one founded on Judeo-Christian values, most of the marriages have been between men and women. However, over the past decade or so, we've had same-sex marriages. And what drew my attention to the knowledge that I already knew, and some of which that I have already shared, is as follows. In 2020, we saw a significant jump in the number of divorces compared to 2019, a much higher number in percentage terms compared to the prior years on a geometric basis. What was surprising is, although there was an increase in the number of divorces taking place, a significant majority of those divorces did not come from opposite-sex marriages. It came from same-sex marriages. Now, the Office of National Statistics is the source of all of my data, mostly, except I advise otherwise. But in this particular instance, the data says that of the same-sex couple, 70% of that group were women. And now the correlation then becomes quite interesting. In same-sex couples, if 70% are women, then it means 70% of women are filing for divorces. That 70% number is consistent with opposite-sex marriages. About 70% of the cases are filed by women. Now, this is not a cause-effect or a blame game, no, but it's a conversation worthy of having. So, it doesn't matter whether it's same-sex or opposite-sex, women are filing for divorce at a rate in excess of what men are doing. Now, I know, having discussed this with a lot of very well-connected people, especially within the legal industry, solicitors, etc., in opposite-sex marriages, even where we have filings by men, of the 30% that is not explicitly noted as filed by women, half of those group, the men who file, say that the women are the ones who had asked for divorces and who have asked for a divorce, and they were in many ways compelled and forced to give her what she wanted. Now, a lot of this was before the 6th of April last year, 2022, when for the first time we then have a no-fault divorce. You don't have to give a reason, you just can walk away whenever you choose to, for whatever reason you choose. So this position predates April 2022. Now what that meant is that if you took half of the 30%, it means that in 15% of the time, it would appear that men are only filing for divorce at less than 2 in 10 divorces. Now that is stunning. But if you move away from the same-sex group and move into from the opposite-sex group and move to the same-sex group, 70% of that same sex are primarily relationship between two women. Therefore, 70% of the filings have been made by women. So there's a consistency there. It almost appears that women are the ones destroying their families and their homes. Again, can I make it very clear? I'm not apportioning blame. I'm just simply saying it's an indication that something is wrong. Because in opposite sex couples, we could say, well, the man is the reason. The man is the cause. And what you would expect to see if men were to blame would be a significant improvement in divorce rates between same-sex female couples. but you're seeing the same numbers, the same results, which means this is not just about men being at fault, as we were led to believe over the past 30, 40 years. Now, I digress, but let me bring you back to the conversation that I started this session with. And in the interactions that I had, I made reference to a number of people. Now, these are people who were known to the loved group that I started the conversation with, and in that group we have a number of women who we knew, single. These are attractive women, intelligent women, accomplished women, educated women. But within the area of relationships, some of them cannot seem to break even, which is just be average or do average, or to be successful. In many ways, there is a history of failure upon failure upon failure. And the question I asked was why? How can this be? Because you have almost a controlled group of friends. One side, all married, mostly with children, happy, and on the other side, single. And the question I was putting across is, what can the group that have achieved success teach the other group? Now, the conclusion was as follows. I'm sure they can teach them everything, but was there willingness on the party of the people doing the teaching to give said wisdom, and was there good faith on the party that would receive the message to act on the knowledge afforded to them? And I came to the conclusion that the answer is no. Partly for two reasons. Number one, women are awful at telling each other the truth. That has been my observation. For some strange reason, I think it's partly to do with a woman's disposition, her attitude, and the general sense of the agreeable demeanor. Things might be too harsh when spoken. So much so that you can see a loved one, a friend, a brother, a sister, who is making all the wrong decisions. But you would rather give her hope in her delusion and her ignorance, rather than give her a stern warning and say, listen, just do what I have done and make some changes. Now, that's the first reason why there will never be progress. Women are terrible at telling each other the truth and holding women accountable. Now, the second reason is, if women will not do it and have no history of doing it, then it falls to men. And here comes in the dilemma. In this cancel culture we have today, you almost have to be insane as a man to speak about women issues, because you will get cancelled in some form or fashion. You will get placed in positions where you're called different names, sexist, misogynistic, and all the various pseudonames that are used to silence and ways that women will use to minimize a man's voice. Now, I could understand. I looked at the husbands of the women who were married, and I said to myself, but how can both of you and your lovely wife, sleep at night when you know someone you love very much, part of the group, is making mistakes? And they would say nothing. And here is the sad part. For fear of offending them and losing the relationship that they have. Now, I have said something before, and let me reiterate that position. Whenever the cause that people believe in become more important than the relationship is at risk of failing. In other words, if there is an ideology you believe in, and that ideology takes preeminence, that so much so that you become almost obsessed with not entertaining anything different, you will, and people are losing, sacrificing relationships because of either a political ideology, a social ideology, a philosophical ideology, and whenever people say things that perhaps they believe hurt their emotions. We have trained, in my opinion, a significant part of the last 3 generations in the West to be reversely narcissistic. We think so much about our feelings, how we feel, how we feel, how we feel. So much so that anything that deviates or draws our attention to a deviation is seen as a threat. And anybody who presents that view is seen as the devil, Satan himself. And woe to you if you come in a vessel called man. So you either have to be insane to talk about women issues, be in a place where you're independent to some extent, and confident, assertive, strong-minded, to be able to speak in good faith and kindly, or perhaps, just perhaps, someone who perhaps you might say is on the other side. In any case, let me speak to the topic. In the short time I have with you, let me speak to the topic of why and relationships should be easy. Now, it's a tongue-in-cheek way of saying things. Simple but not easy. We talk about that in the industry or concept of investing. Investing is simple, but not easy. Relationships, I said that for particular reasons. Relationships are not supposed to be easy, but they are supposed to be simple. They can be made easy if you know how to make them easy. In the same way, relationship success is not a science. It's not an art. A science means you follow particular steps, and with absoluteness, you can guarantee the outcome. It doesn't work that way. We know love doesn't get the job done, no matter how much you love someone. People who are madly in love in the first year look at each other and sign the divorce papers in the 5th or the 4th year. It's not an art, because an art would mean that you're either born with the ability to make success of your relationships or you don't have it. It's more of a craft. I liken it to cooking, that you study the ingredients, and by practice, you don't get better at relationships by reading books or by theoretical mind playing and by just talking about relationships. You have to get into a relationship and use those muscles you have. For most people, the reason we are not succeeding in relationships is simply because our relationship muscles are dead. Some people, they've atrophied. They have actually not been used properly, not been used long enough, and therefore, when we need them to work, they fall short, and therefore we get failure. In any case, I like to talk about 5 things. And these 5 things will be expanded in the sessions that follow. But I think these 5 things, perhaps, as a general overview, could be an important method through which, whether you are a man or you are a woman, you can start to think about how to make relationships work. Now, I'm going to be speaking to women in this particular instance. And I say that primarily because I believe that if you look at the data between men and women, for every 1,000 in the population, which is the measuring approach, what we find is that men are still being and getting married at roughly a 10% rate higher than women. Now, this is despite we having a population of women that exceeds the population of men. Now, this means that at some level, now, whether you like the information or not, at some level, men are still looking to be married. And when they're not finding mates within their kin or within their geography, these men are going outside the country and finding wives. Now, let me put another thing into the picture so you can understand that the data doesn't help the women. There are more women in the UK than there are men of marriageable age. In addition to that, men die at a higher rate than women. There is roughly about a 4 or 5 year period if you look at the life expectancy between men and women. So you outlive us and we die faster. But we have a 10% higher rate of marriage across the various generations. Now, we have to exclude those who are in the silent generation who could still be alive, and those who are in the great generation who could still be alive. And we have to almost even exclude the baby boom generation and simply look at marriages between those from Generation X onwards. Generation X, Generation Y, Generation Z. And the reason for that is because that is where you have the bulk of the marriage taking place. Now that said, here are 5 things perhaps that should be considered. I will and may not have the time to go into the detail, but the first step is to just let these ideas marinate in your head for a few days, a few hours. Now, if you disagree with them, by all means, in this particular channel, I talk about things not because I'm looking for people to approve of my views. I welcome those who actually vehemently disagree with me and those who perhaps are almost dissentful in their position. You're more than welcome. Just do so respectfully. You can say whatever you want in the comment section. And I don't police those places. Disagree by disliking or otherwise. But I welcome every feedback. Number 1. Women. Men are simple. Start with that. We are simple. And across geographies, cultures, race, ethnicities, preferences, tastes, age, we are simple. First of all, define and decide the outcomes you want in the future. Some women do not want to be married, and that's perfectly fine. Some women do want to be married. If you fall within the latter group, in any case, the conversation I have been alluding to were women who fell within the latter group. They want to be married. First step, you've decided you want to be married. Step 2, decide. Do you subscribe to a traditional pathway to relationships or a modern pathway to relationships? You see, water and oil cannot mix. They have 2 different densities. That's basic science. You have to understand the properties. You have to decide which of the 2 you subscribe to. The idea of choosing part of each is an oxymoron. It doesn't work. It always leads to failure. There has to be a dominant, and there has to be what I call a sub. Choose which of the 2 you want. You can't have it 50-50. And women these days, especially modern women, women who are 40, 45 and below, would like to choose all of the benefits of the traditional pathway to relationships, but also do not want any of the responsibilities. But they want all of the benefits of the modern. In many ways, you're creating a monster, some form of like Toy Story, where you have all of this. This guy takes out the head of this particular toy and puts the leg of this particular toy and sticks the head of a dinosaur, and then suddenly you have this monster. The monster falls apart eventually because he wasn't constructed with love or constructed with care. Once you've gone through those 2 steps of deciding, do I want to be married or not? And do I want the modern or the traditional? You simply go to the end. Just decide what outcomes you want. And this is very important. Now, Stephen Covey talked about the highly effective traits of effective people. And in the business sense, he described a concept called begin with the end in mind, which is how things are created successfully. You start with the vision, which means you see the end, and then you come back to the present and you design a pathway to get you there. Very simple. Which makes success predictable and conversely makes failure predictable, but also preventable. So once you've gone through those 2 stages, the 5 items are number 1. Determine and decide what your value proposition and exchange is. A lot of women have heard the concept, what do you bring to the table? And many people do not understand what that means. They understand it in a very vague term. It comes from the early 13th century, where people played games. And if you played games at a table, there will be a time when you find yourself at a disadvantage. And what do you bring to the table was a way of actually rotating the table in such a way that it made everyone or the positions almost equal. That was the essence. The essence was, okay, now there is some form of equality, a value exchange, not always 50-50 or 100-100, but a value exchange that both parties were happy with. This was the art of negotiation, that both parties could sit down together and you come up with a value exchange proposition that each party was walking away with, and they were happy. So number one is determine and understand what your value proposition or exchange is. This is business 101. This is supply demand 101. If you study economics, it's the first thing you learn. And people who do not study economics understand this. For example, you have a piece, let's call it an apple. I have a few bananas. I want an apple. You want a banana. And I simply say to you, what would you accept in order to exchange and part way with some of your apple or all of your apple in exchange for what I have? Whatever you tell me, I have to be willing to meet you somewhere, hopefully fair. Particularly if it's a transaction, then you have what we call zero-sum processes, meaning it's all about winning and all is fair in love and war. Therefore, some interactions are zero-sum in their nature. But if I was looking for a long-term relationship, I would look for something beyond the transaction. I would seek a relationship, which would mean I'm looking for a positive sum, which implies that both of us gain something and we're happy with what we gain because we want to be able to transact in the future consistently in harmony. Modern women, and generally speaking, are awful at recognizing and saying to themselves, what is the value exchange? In other words, what do you bring to the table? Men understand that. So I used an example that I would share as follows. I said to my beloved, I said, here's a scenario. I said, go back to when you were 23. Now, this is, I kid you not. And most women will agree and understand this example. I said to her, go back to when you were 23. I said, imagine yourself youthful, gorgeous, pretty, having all this charm and charisma, having the world ahead of you, men falling at your feet. And I came up to you as a 23-year-old boy. And I was trying to get you to become my girlfriend. And she said, I never dated boys who were my age. I never wanted boys my age. And I said, and that was fine. I said, if you were to look back in your time, what you found was boys around your age group, whether they met you on the streets or in the pub or whether they met you in the clubs, when they were amongst their friends, there was an excitement, like, go on, son, go on, son. The idea that we actually found a woman who was as attractive as you are and accepted our offer. We felt we won the lottery. The reason being that most of our friends would say to us, she's out of your league. You don't have anything to bring to the table. You're broke, you're poor, you have potential, you have almost no intellectual, educational reserve to be able to lead her. And in addition to that, you are a boy. And she said to me, yeah, I agree. She understood it. Men understand that example. We accept it. We have nothing to offer to you. So we actually are grateful. We're excited with the idea that we have a young, youthful, gorgeous woman on our arms because we exchange nothing. I said to her, well, can I inverse the example? Women who get to a certain age, 35, 30 to 35, let's use the same woman, she remains unmarried. At 23, she's an 8 or a 9. All the men want her. But at 35, she finds actually maybe 1 in 10 of the men who wanted her before has any interest. And she wonders why. Well, it's the same thing. But in this particular instance, she refuses to reduce her expectations. She still has in her mind the picture of the youthful 23-year-old, 22-year-old who was gorgeous, who all men wanted. She doesn't understand that the men who were 35, same age as she is at 35, do not consider her to be within their league, primarily because of the value exchange process. She had beauty the younger she was, and therefore the balance of power was with her. The boy who was 23 had nothing. But as we age as men, we gain experience, we gain education, we gain success, and from an economic perspective, we become more attractive to women. We become resource objects. Women are always sex objects from a man's perspective, either sex or reproduction objects. So as a man ages, he becomes more attractive to the opposite sex because women want more of what we have as we age, on the basis that we can attain more resources. As a woman ages, she has less of what men want, which is sex and the reproductive aspect to a woman as an object. Therefore, the older you get, the more you have to reduce your expectations, because you are, I hate to use this word, from the dating perspective and the sexual marketplace, your value is declining. Your reproductive fertility value is declining. Even your non-sexual marketplace value, your femininity, your attitude is declining. From a resource perspective, you are increasing. But men do not care about your success economically because we have innately built into us the need to provide. We're not looking for a provider. We are innately providers and protectors. We're not looking for priests. We are innately the priests of the family from the perspective that we teach the culture. Right? We share the vision, you teach the culture. Now, I say all of that to explain a simple concept. We can tell boys at a young age, you are not worth much and you do not deserve her. And the boys accept it. And the one question they ask is a simple one. What do I have to do to be deserving? And the group will say, go out there, make something of yourself, be successful, come back, and we'll consider you. So he goes away, and in 10 years' time, at 32, he returns and says, I'm a man now, I can afford her. For women, we don't tell them that value declines. Now remember, your value as a human being remains. You're valuable in the sight of God. You're a valuable citizen. There's equality of rights. You're valuable under the law, and equality under the law. There's equality of opportunities. But in the sexual marketplace, the producer of a product has to consider what the consumer wants. And if women cannot understand this producer-consumer example or supply-demand example, women will always fail as they get older, because they will continue to maintain the standard that they once had at 23, despite being a decade older. And at 35, in this particular instance, with the women I'm referring to, I couldn't understand why a lot of these women were then making decisions that were sabotaging further the little time they had between 35 and 40. In many ways, in this group I'm referring to, it almost felt as though these women were looking to either go back to school, do a PhD, travel abroad to far countries and start a new experience from a position of being with nature. And I couldn't fathom that all of those expenses, all of that time, all of their emotions will be invested in running away to find a distraction, rather than investing that into themselves and saying, why don't I just understand what men want and give them what they want. Now, number 2 is proximity. If you've read the book Acres of Diamonds, it talks about stories. One had to do with oil and the other had to do with diamonds. In this particular instance, a couple sold their farm, sold their ranch, and decided to journey across the United States to the opposite end because they believed that there was oil to be found in that part of the country. Many years after journeying, they decided, having experienced failure, decided to come back to their hometown. And upon arrival, they said, well, we sold our farm many years ago. Perhaps we can go back and see what has become of the farm. Now, as they approached, they came into contact with the most protective, you might say, defense that they had ever seen around that area. There was police and soldiers and the military, and there was people protecting the area. And they inquired. It turned out that, and I could be conflating whether it's oil or gold. I think in this particular instance, this example is gold rather than oil. That they discovered something called Suther's Mill, which was the second largest gold reserve in the North American continent on their farm. They left their farm seeking what was available and within proximity to them, but they believed that it was somewhere else. The concept of the grass being greener on the other side is a myth. The grass is just green. Your acres of diamonds is where you are. Proximity matters if you understand how to look. The point I'm making by this is, as a woman, if you want to be married, you have to put yourself in proximity to the men who can help you achieve your long-term goals and dreams. It's not a man's responsibility to find you. It's your responsibility to parade yourself so that you can be found by him. Now let me say that again. Women believe that when they are ready, they will go to the supermarket of men and pick a man. And what the older women are finding is that those powers are only possible to younger women because they have beauty, youth, attractiveness, etc. As you age, your responsibility is to put yourself in proximity to the men you want and to allow those men to choose you or select you as a mate. The man is the one who chooses. We are the gatekeepers to relationships and who we give our family name to. We are gatekeepers to who we bring into our family. You, on the other hand, you are gatekeepers to your body, your emotions, and your womb. You control that. But with regards to those who want to be in relationships, whatever derivative it may come in, the man gets to choose. Your role is simply get in proximity and remain in proximity. And we talk about going to a buffet. What's the first thing you have to do? Get in line. Number 2, stay in line. And if you stay in line, eventually you will get to the front of the table and you can have whatever you want. The mistake then appears when people move between you get in line and you step out and you come back and you step out, and what you find is the same thing as someone waiting at a bus stop, sees that the buses have not arrived, decides to run to the next bus stop, and as they run to the next bus stop, the bus goes past them. And they get to the next bus stop and they wait and the bus doesn't appear, and they decide, well, I may as well go back to where I was before, because that might be how I become successful. And as they go back, another bus goes by. You have to get in line, stay in line. Proximity matters. Now, number 3, being in proximity is not the root equation to success or being chosen by a man. You can be in proximity, like the couple in question, and not be found and not be seen, partly because of number 3, obscurity. You are obscure. They cannot see you, they cannot hear you, you're not interested enough, and therefore you're not chosen. I have been stunned in my lifetime at how lazy women are when it comes to dating. and relationships. From a young age, I relate this to real estate and investing. If we go back to 2008 in the United Kingdom, in 2006, 2007, the real estate market, the property market in the UK was overpriced. Anybody with a sense would have known. But people were buying and going through the process of overinflating the prices, the market prices of properties. By 2008, we had the crash, and it took about 3 years for the crash in the market correction to return to what we call a normal level. Those who bought in 2007, but who had to sell between 2008 and 2010, made a loss. Most of them made a loss. Why? Because property prices were inflated. On the other hand, those who waited and bought at the bottom of the cycle and who held have made a tremendous profit. Now, the reason I say this is as follows. Women generally come into the world once you turn 18. You are like a .com stock. You are like a UK property in 2007. Now, believe me, let me say this. I actually believe that you are like a property in the UK in 2023. Generally overpriced. Certainly in 2022, generally overpriced, with your price exceeding your actual value. At 18, a woman is introduced to this world of men. She has all the things that men find attractive: youth, beauty. Her body is changing, so much so that she's starting to see herself as being powerful. She can walk down the high street, walk into a local bank. The bank manager can say, listen, I'd like to invite you to a party we have. In the party, she gets to meet the CEO of the same bank. In the same party, the CEO says, I'd like to invite you to a party I have with my friends on a yacht. She gets invited to a party of billionaires and multi-millionaires. She has absolutely nothing. But she's being bestowed upon her all of this attention. Therefore, she has a sense that she's more important than she actually is. She's like hotstock.com. High valuation, very little value, high market prices, subject and likely to go through a correction. That correction is time. As she transitions from 18, she finds 18 to 23, she's hot as hotcakes. 23 to 25, the world is her oyster. 27 and onwards to 30, she starts to find that she's not able to command as much power because there is another new property, new real estate, new .com stock, new technology stock. 30 and onwards, no one is actually bidding for her. Her PE ratio drops from 100 down to, who knows, maybe 4.5. And it's very quickly trending to a 0, except she makes the right decision. Now, the point of this is actually as follows. You can be in proximity, but obscure. And at an early age, women have a sense that they are more valuable than they are. It creates almost a narcissistic ideology. As she starts to age, because she maintains that 18-year-old hot girl image, she actually does very little to bring something to the table. When she gets into proximity, she's not special. She's not noticeable. She's obscure. Your first way of breaking the whole curse of obscurity is to grab attention. You have to get people's attention. And you do so with what you have been given and what you have. Men are visual. So you become less obscure by appealing to the parts of men that are visual. You have to be attractive. But most importantly, even if you're not attractive on the face, you have to have a fitness that is a standout compared to other women. Now, in the UK, here are some statistics. Close to 70% of people in the black population are overweight. 65% of white women are overweight. The only group that is below 50% are Oriental Asians, primarily. What this means is that if you're black, 7 out of 10 women are overweight. And for you to stand out, all you have to be is one of the 3 that is in shape. And you're winning. Now, if you can even extend it and be one of the 3 that is fit, I mean, you stand out. Your height to waist ratio is on point. Your height to weight ratio is on point. Your features are accentuated. You maximize the uniqueness of your, whether that be your racial features or whether that be your general acquired features, but you accentuate yourself. Men are visual. We don't care who you are until we've seen you and accepted you first, visually. Now, this also means that how you dress plays a role. I'm going to talk about retention, and when I talk about retention, I will talk about what I call your self-image and the A, B, C, D, E, F up to Z of image. But you cannot be obscure when you are in proximity. The men you want are desired by other women, and therefore it's important for you to get his attention. Most women are raised to think that they should not do anything for men, that they are the special creatures and the world revolves around you. Happy wife, happy life. This is all nonsense. That only applies to men who are either beta males, femme men, men who are your age group, 20s and below, who have not come into their manhood, who have not had success, or who have not actually even failed in life, and therefore have come to the appreciation of their gifts. The men who lord over you and do whatever you want are simps, put it very, very bluntly. Because when a man comes into his maturity, especially from 35 and above, we have a sense of who we are, our value, our failures, our shortcomings, our fears, but we're logical. We want a value exchange that is considerate. We're not asking for the moon and the sun. We're simply saying we want good weather, and we will dress for the occasion. You have to be less obscure, and you do so, and I'll talk about your ABCD. You do so with your ABCD of your image. Now, number 4 is competition. You know your value proposition in exchange. You get into proximity, number 2. You try not to be obscure. And when you have been noticed, because think about this, if I say, hey, I've got your attention. I know my voice was loud, but I got your attention. If I stood by the side, and let me give you a good example. Many a times, if you go to Camden, or if you come to Camden, along parts of Camden, as you approach the market, you find people on the street. They're trying to beckon you and guide you into coming into their stores, to patronize their stores. Most of the time, I walk past. But every now and then, someone catches my attention because they stand out from the rest. It could be a smile, it could be an outfit, it could be a gesture, it could just be perhaps a mannerism, sometimes how they speak. They are within proximity to me, and they are not obscure. And here's the important thing. When they get my attention, they are willing to compete. They know how to handle rejections and objections. Women do not know how to compete. Women do not know how to handle rejection, and women do not know how to handle objections. Most women, the first time they approach a man and he says, I'm not interested, it's almost like a jarring moment for most women that they can go for 4 years and refuse to ever approach a man. Men who have value and men who have some value are desired by other women. Believe this. If your position is that you would never chase a man, then it means you've never met a man worth a dime. Because men who have their shit together, men who are accomplished, women are chasing those men for one purpose only. Because they want to be invited to join that man's family. They want that name. They want that association. But here's the key thing. Those women understand their outcomes. The lifestyles they want to lead and live. They understand what they want to achieve. And they are willing to do whatever it takes. That might mean walking up to a man and saying, I think you're attractive. Or starting up a conversation. If you're rejected, you try again. If you're rejected, you try again. You have to be less obscure. But the key thing at number 4 is you have to learn how to compete. I go back to the group I was speaking with, and I asked the question. I said, that is your husband. Let's pretend both of you ladies who were best friends. You knew each other before he came into your life and before you guys got married and had kids. What if on the day he stepped up to you, both of you were together? Both of you found him attractive because he is an attractive young man. Would you have been willing to fight, to compete, to get him? The answer was no. Their relationship is more important. And my response is, there you go, that's your answer. They were surprised, and I don't understand why this is a surprise. When I said, if I have next to me my brother, my best friend, and other men who are within my inner circle, and both of us, and this has happened, we're single, we see a woman who is attractive, we look at each other and we say, the game is on. To the victor goes the spoils. Let the best man win. Men are used to competing. The person who loses shakes the hand of the person who wins eventually and says, I guess you beat me. We get better. We're happy to compete because from a young age we are told as men that we have no value. All we have is potential, that we must convert that value into potential into value and make something of ourselves. And so we're happy to compete. And the older we get, that willingness to compete does not leave us. And when we go and we are rejected, we just simply say, I'm not the better man today. We go again, which is why you can see a man go into a bar, walk up to a woman who is a 10 and try to proposition her. She says no. He goes to the one who's a 9. She says no. He goes to the one who's an 8. She says no. He goes to the one who is a 7. She says no. He goes to the one who is a 6 and she says, well, you're cute. And he's smiling. His confidence is back. Why? He understands how to accept rejection and how to deal with objections. Women, you have to learn how to compete. Now, I said something else to the group that I think is important. A woman who's 35, and I'm going to use martial arts as a good example. I participated in martial arts at several levels for many years. As I got older, I found, having been competing nationally, European level, world championship level, I did a lot of damage to my body. My joints, as I got older, couldn't take the beating. But even when I was 35 and 37, I was still competing with boys who were 28, 18. I didn't have the speed, but I had the wisdom. And I was kicking their asses. It was too easy. Why? It wasn't because I had more potential. They had more potential than I did. They were younger. They had youth on their side than I did. I was older. They had the recovery time than I did. When I was younger, 20s, I would train for 3 hours in 10 sessions, finish at 9:30, go out and party, and be out till 3 in the morning, go to sleep at 3:30, 4, and wake up at 6:30, and I would be fine. At my age, if I finish a 3-hour training in karate or jiu-jitsu, I'm exhausted. It takes me hours to fall asleep. It takes me hours to recover. I'm an older person. What did I have that the younger ones did not have? Experience. So I wasn't fighting with aggression. I would just set the traps, and I'll take my time, and I'll wait for their mistakes, and I'll capitalize on their mistakes. So much so that it doesn't matter what your age is. Even if you're young and youthful, the experience of the ages is always an advantage, because I can lure you into feeling as though you're intimidating me. The movie 13th Warrior rings a bell, where you had two people challenging each other. On one side you had Antonio Banderas and his team, and on the other side you had the king's son and his team. Two strong men. The wiser one, the more experienced one, the smaller one deceived the bigger, inexperienced one into thinking that power was how it was going to be decided. Eventually he lost. Why? You set traps. You lure your opponent into believing that they have the power and control. They fall into your trap and you go for the kill. Older women should be winning the game of men, especially for men who are 30 and above, much more so than women who are 22. Women who are 22 and 23, a decade your junior, have youth and beauty. What they lack is experience. You should be more feminine. You should understand how to play the man game. You should have dated enough. You should be able to speak to a man logically and say, listen, I'm not as hot as she is, but you will be happy with me. You will have serenity. You will have peace. I will support your vision. You don't have to run around thinking what's wrong with her. I will be a helpmeet to you, which is what you need in this phase of your life. You should be able to compete with the things you should already have. The problem we have, unfortunately, is women who are 23 have beauty and youth and femininity. The ones who are 35 lack beauty and youth, but lack femininity. So they cannot compete with what should be a natural advantage. The idea of saying, well, she's 22 and just an airhead. She's teachable. At 35, you're no longer teachable. So it's a disadvantage. The airhead comment is actually a strategic advantage to younger women, because the young woman can say, listen, I'm young. I haven't actually had a mark of a man on me. I haven't dated someone for many years, and I haven't been used by men for many years. Therefore, I'm like a blank canvas. I'm teachable. I'm an airhead because I don't know. It doesn't mean I don't have the ability to know. Now, number 5 is the word retention. A woman attracts a man. That's easy because those attraction triggers is given freely by men, especially men who want to have sex. We will be attracted to anything. I can walk into a bathroom, and I have walked into bathrooms and seen diagrams drawn on the wall of a sexy woman's body, and I have had men taking a piss, looking at that painting on the wall or art form on the wall and getting excited, finishing, washing their hands and just staring at that painting or art form on the wall. We're visual. It doesn't take much to arouse us. We're that simple. We're that easy. You will judge by the man you can attract. But retention is not the man's responsibility. It's your responsibility. And you do so, and here is where the self-image concept comes in. There's something called the ABC, and it goes on to Z of self-image. I'll give you a few of those. Your appearance, your behavior, communication, your digital avatar, how you present yourself online. Your E is your emotional IQ, emotional intelligence. F, fitness and femininity. G, whether you're a gift to the man. Whether you have gratitude, whether you have a grateful spirit. H, humility. I, are you inspiring? Are you insightful? And it goes on. J, are you joyful? K, are you kind? L, are you loving? M, do you have the maternal or motherly attributes? So the way you retain a man after you've attracted the man is with what I call your self-image. Your attitude plays a huge role. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and you can go all the way to Z. Men are simple. Therefore, if you cannot master the retention game, men and women are great at attracting. Men will fall for that because they just want sex. When women attract men, they believe that's all that is needed. No, for men who you want in your life. You have to retain them. And you retain them by mostly things other than sex. Now, sex comes at the end of the ABCD. S, T, U, V, S is at the end. Sex is not what you retain a man with. You retain a man with more things. Serenity, servanthood, sex plays a part. So if you haven't mastered the art of retention, because your muscles are weak, your dating muscles, then you will always fail. Now, I have to stop today's session here, and I hope it's been useful. In the sessions to follow, I will try and expand on some of these items, and I look forward to seeing you again.